Okay, so next we've got a really exciting panel of rising stars in politics who are desi, who are really in a position to be advising kind of the next presidents, vice presidents of the United States. I'll welcome them now. Please join us for an exciting conversation, not just in a panel, but we're going to go into a breakout room and get a chance to talk to them. For those of you young people who are excited and interested in getting engaged, not just in this election, but beyond and potentially as a career. So after I introduce them, we're going to close the live stream. Deepak Raj, our co-founder, is going to speak, and then we're going to go to a program called Rally, where we try to recreate what we have with the in-person summit, which is really the chance to meet each other and to talk about kind of what draws us into politics and what what advice we have for those who want to engage and to serve the public. So I'll start with our first panelist. It's Ganesh Sitaraman. He is a professor at Vanderbilt Law School, and he was a senior advisor to Senator Elizabeth Warren on her presidential campaign. Then we have Sabrina Singh, who is currently the press secretary for Senator Kamala Harris on the Biden for President campaign. We also have Farooq Mitha, who is director of Muslim engagement for Joe Biden for president. We have Raghu Devaguptapu, who is a partner at Left Hook Strategies, and Rohini Kosoglu, who's a senior advisor for Senator Kamala Harris on the Biden for President campaign. So thank you all for joining us. It's really wonderful to have you and to have you give folks the chance to hear from you and your perspectives on how you've made it to this place in politics, and what inspires you to engage not just in this election but as a career. So I'll start with that. Maybe let me start with Ganesh. Can you tell us a little bit about why it's so important to vote in this election and kind of what inspires you to engage generally?
Well, thanks so much, Neil, and thanks to everyone at Impact for having us. I'm really excited to be here and talk with everyone about this election and why it's so important. As Neil mentioned, I'm a law professor. I teach constitutional law, I teach legislation and regulation, and a lot of what I study is basically American democracy, how our constitutional system works, why it works, and why it's under threat. And that's really what motivates me so much this year, is that I think that we're at a really pivotal moment in our history where democracy is on the ballot, where constitutional traditions are on the ballot. And what I think is so important in getting out there is thinking about what it means to have a democracy, all of our role in the democracy, and really ultimately what our constitutional system requires is for us, all of the people, to be active in the political system in order for the system to work. So that's a big part of why I'm in it this year and why I think it's so important.
Cool. And thank you so much for joining us. Farooq, what inspires you to engage in politics and in this election in particular?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. This election, as a Muslim American, Donald Trump won this election on the backs of immigrant communities, people like our families and where we come from. And there's also so much at stake on the ballot when I think about not just what was just said, but also when I think about issues like climate change, immigration, and so many other issues. And we look at the COVID pandemic right now. I mean, people are literally dying in this country every day because of incompetence in the White House. So for me, there's a lot of reasons to get involved, but that's the one that's driving me the most, I think, right this second, I would have to say.
And how about you, Rohini?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I think what the others have said is great. What I think about is I've been very blessed to, before this kind of role, to spend a good chunk of my life on Capitol Hill. And one of the blessings is being able to see people from all different walks of life enter the doors of senators and congressmen and congresswomen, and walk in with an ability to know that whether they're fighting for healthcare from the Trump administration, or they're fighting to make sure that they don't get deported, it's what we've seen over the last 4 years has painted a really clear contrast about what what's at stake in this election. And so all the things that I think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are running on, and frankly the desire for us all to vote, I think I'm so excited that we get to put all these past 4 years and towards something that feels tangible. So when the American people walk into that ballot box, that they, for I think in a long time, feel like there's a very clear contrast about what kind of future they want to choose.
Great, very very well said. Raghu, what drives you to the ballot box?
MT's words. Look, I do think that the soul of this nation is on the ballot this election cycle. I think every election cycle is critical. I think and the history books are on the line here, and I think the choices that our electorate makes this election cycle are going to be written about for a really long time. The importance is in feels in some ways even more important than any other election cycle I've worked on, and I've been doing this a long time.
And Sabrina, you're our last one. I'm gonna put you on the spot and just ask you, in terms of what engages you, if you can tell us a bit about your family history and some of that. I think it's great for folks to hear.
Oh, sure. So I guess, well, in terms of family history, I think what you were getting at was my grandfather was very involved in the political movement and in India, but then also when he left India, he came to the U.S. and lobbied for Indian Americans to gain citizenship. And so he was part of a group that lobbied Congress and successfully was able to get citizenship for Indian Americans here that were living in the country. And he, walked the very halls that I began to work in when I started working in the U.S. House. And it was, I feel very inspired by him. I don't know if he is the reason why I got into politics and into campaigns in particular. I think that what Raghu said is completely right, is that this is, I think, the most important election of our lifetime. And I'm just so proud to be working for hopefully the next president, Joe Biden, and our next vice president, Kamala Harris. And I just, from being involved in the 2016 cycle and working on Hillary Clinton's campaign, it just felt that 2016 was just so unfinished, and we just cannot let Donald Trump have a second term. And so I'm just so excited to be with all of you today and be working to elect our next president.
Thank you. And I mean, a number of you mentioned the issues: climate change, immigration. Just it seems even bigger than that. Like Raghu, you mentioned the soul of America. Ganesh, just democracy is on the ballot. What's your message? And I can go through each of you. But what's your message for young people who might just want to tune out and not get engaged, or really are just turned off by the whole process? Maybe you can talk about kind of how you first engaged, or your first job, or your expectations of what the process looked from the outside, and kind of what you found, or what is rewarding about making this part of your career. Ganesh, if you want to go ahead first.
Sure. So, I think there's a lot of people out there who are feeling pretty demoralized often, and particularly in a news cycle that delivers one punch after another to the gut. But one of the things that I think is the most striking about being active in politics is that you realize something pretty quickly, which is all the people who are involved are just people. They all started out doing anything random, maybe knocking on doors, making phone calls, and over time got more and more involved, and in some cases are making the big decisions for the whole country. But they're ordinary people. And I think that gives me, and I hope would give a lot of others hope, that you can really change things if you see that hope is something that comes from doing actions, from getting small wins, from getting involved a little bit, you can do a lot more, and that it's not something that has huge barriers to entry. So I think that that's a place where, if you're feeling like it's hard and that it's hard to make change of any kind, really the way we've made change has always just been that ordinary people said, I'm sick of this and want to do something different, and then they did it.
I think, Rohini, you were one of the first South Asians, or maybe the first South Asian chief of staff on the Hill or in the Senate. How do you feel about what Ganesh is saying? What was your thought before you got to that role, and kind of were there small wins, or what kept you going and engaged?
Yeah. So first of all, I love that. I think that everything Ganesh said is so spot on. I will say that I think what people have to understand is if you don't sort of fight, whether it's internally from the inside or from the outside, to help to basically be at the table, the decision will get made, whether or not you're part of it. And so it is incumbent upon all of us to think through what is our role, whether you want to go in on the inside or you want to push from the outside. And for me, I think that it when I first started, there wasn't a lot of people when I would walk around Capitol Hill that looked like me at all, and that's changing. And so and part of that is because over time, I think with the internet and people also in different positions seeing that there's people that look like you. I think so many of us in our generation have not had people that look like us in most of the positions we're in. And, but part of it is also just understanding that, we just have to keep sort of moving forward piece by piece. And, it's very important to me when we hire up, whether it's people in any of our Senate offices or campaign. And I was their chief of staff on the presidential, that we create, a place that looks like America. And so, and that they're not just invited to the meeting, but they're included in the meeting. And what I mean is that, it's important that people bring their unique lived experience, because, that's why we're all here. Right. And so I think to the earlier point, we're all just normal people. And so the more we can do to encourage each other and not get intimidated by any of these sort of slots or positions, that is something we should all carry with us.
Thanks. And Raghu, you've been on it from the campaign side. What can you tell us about that versus being in government and policy? What kind of keeps you inspired? And maybe it's the candidates you support. Maybe it's in flipping of a vote in an important state if we win the Senate or the House. What keeps you inspired?
Yeah, and it changes, but I will say this, and foundationally, I ran my first campaign when I was an undergrad, which was a really long time ago, and I never stopped. I may have told my parents that I was going to try to get to law school in the middle of this and didn't do it, but look, I got to college, the University of Wisconsin, and what I realized was early on, and I was a kid, 17 years old, I realized that I was starting from a starting point in a race that a lot of other kids, particularly kids who were of color, weren't starting from that same line. And, they were starting far behind the point that I felt like I was starting the race from. And it really had a big impact on me, because it made me realize that the sacrifices that my parents who immigrated to the States in the late 60s, the sacrifices that my parents made for my sister and I were significant, that we just had an opportunity, to do something with ourselves in this new country for my folks that a lot of other kids didn't have. It was an eye opener. And it struck me early on that the best way to sort of celebrate that experience and that story was to actually fight so that other people can have the same opportunities that I've had. And that's where I sort of started in politics, and then along the way realized sort of the impact that you can make. I will say before I stop, I I ran my first campaign in 1994, I think, and I've spent the majority of my career being the only brown person in the room, and sort of where we are now, and all of the talent that has grown in the industry it's awesome. It's really thrilling and it's exciting because our community is part of the fabric and is continuously getting a bigger seat at the table and contribution into the differences that we need to make to grow the American story. And that's really rewarding.
Yeah, thank you. I know you've basically helped elect every DSE member of Congress and, every down ballot race, including some uphill battles that I know about. But, thank you for everything you're doing. We have a couple minutes left before we go into the rally rooms. I guess, Sabrina, one question for you. I know you worked on a number of campaigns and you were, really in the presidential I feel like kind of had a broad sense of experience and how they run and and different candidates. Is there a thread and kind of what you felt has kind of kept you through through each one?
Well, I guess I worked for 2 mayors this cycle, former mayors. I think the biggest through line between the candidates that at least I choose to work for, or the campaigns, is that one, every single person that I've ever worked for has always wanted to make a difference in the lives of who they represent, or the broader country. But 2, I identify with some like really important values that they hold near and dear, and something that my parents taught me growing up is that the importance of being involved in your community, but also the importance of giving back to your community. And that was something that, I think across all the Democrats that we have, from the top of the ticket down, I think, our democratic values are so embodied in these candidates. And something that, I think got me very involved is that there's so many people in this world that are struggling, and in this country that are struggling and just not being able to get ahead. And so it always was so important to me to work for folks that want to make sure that, the American dream is accessible for everyone. I feel very fortunate that my parents were able to provide me with the resources and, the things that I needed to help get ahead, but not everyone has access to that. And, you see so many people that, or kids that fall behind in school just because they don't have access to, updated textbooks, to school supplies. And so it's always been something that's really important to me to work for those people that just want to make folks' lives better. And so that's sort of been why I've been able to work for just some incredible people, and I'm very excited to close out this presidential cycle with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Thank you. Farooq, you're the last one. We'll jump to the breakouts right after this. So really excited to give folks the opportunity to talk to you. Can you tell me a bit about, we started with the first job thing, so let me go back to that. Kind of what was your entry, and kind of what has been your thread in the work that you've done?
Yeah, I started in politics literally out of nowhere. Like a lot of people from our backgrounds, I was pre-med in undergrad. And I said, I think I should try something different. And I literally started in politics stuffing envelopes in Florida, where I'm from, for a Democratic candidate running for governor. And I liked it. And I kind of stayed involved in my local Democratic Party in Tampa and Hillsborough County. And my first paid job came when the former mayor of Miami at that time was running for U.S. Senate. And he came to Tampa, and he had a day of events that he had to go to. So somebody called me up and said, "Hey, Farooq, can you drive him around for the day?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll do it." So I picked him up from the airport. We went to several events in the Tampa Bay area. And next thing you know, within a few weeks, he hired me to run his campaign in that part of the state. And that was my first job. And it just kind of goes back to what Ganesh and others were saying, that we just I think we have to just decide that we want to make a change. and get involved. And I started really with, at that time, back, in 2001 or two, we didn't have any mentors or others from our communities that were there to give us that guidance, not as many at least. So a lot of us just learned on the fly, and we just kind of made it happen. I think the benefit of where we are now is there's people like the folks on this panel and others who've been around and are there to help provide that mentorship to others that we may not have had when we were starting out.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I remember when I was an intern in the vice president's office under Vice President Biden, there was a job almost specifically for someone to write letters to Eagle Scouts around the country to congratulate them, or, and correspondence is a huge department in the White House, and that's an entry way for a lot of people, and you care about the mission. I have a friend who started in correspondence and went on to be chief of staff of legislative affairs, and really you make a good point, and your mentorship, and especially for all of you folks who are really doing amazing things and working with leaders of our country, it's really helpful for folks to know, that's where the path starts to get these kinds of opportunities and to really get to serve and to focus on many of the issues that you care about, from democracy to immigration to climate and to others. So